Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating plunge into Ghana's 1992 constitution. And, forget dusty legal texts. What we have here is quite a remarkable blueprint for a modern democracy. It's designed not just to govern, but really to protect its people and define the very essence of citizen duty. We're sifting through the full text, and that includes its 96 amendments, to give you a direct, unfiltered look at its core principles.
Absolutely. And our mission for you is pretty straightforward. It's a shortcut to grasping its core ideas, understanding some, well, truly unique features, and seeing that intricate balance of power and rights it sets up.
Right.
We want to show you what this document actually means for the people, for the government, and, for the nation's future. It's the look beyond just the rules, touching on Ghana's national identity and resilience.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We should probably begin, like all good stories, right at the beginning with the preamble. It's not just some formal opening. It feels like a powerful mission statement for the entire country. It lays out these grand ideals: liberty, equality, prosperity, justice, accountability.
And crucially, it grounds all of these hopes, these aspirations in the sovereign will of the people, universal adult suffrage, the rule of law. These are foundational. It's a statement right at the start that sets a very clear, pretty ambitious vision for how the nation should operate.
So with ideals that high, how does this Constitution actually ensure its own authority? How does it make sure it's not just, a nice list of suggestions?
Well, that's where Article 1 comes straight in, making it absolutely clear. The Constitution is supreme, full stop. Any other law, any action that's inconsistent with it is simply void. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Supreme sounds absolute, yeah. But how is that supremacy actually enforced on the ground? What happens if someone, say, tries to ignore it?
Okay, now here's where we hit one of those truly remarkable provisions. Article 2 gives the Supreme Court the specific power to strike down inconsistent laws or actions. But, and this is key, it goes further. Disobeying one of these Supreme Court orders, it isn't just contempt of court, it's actually classified as a high crime.
A high crime, wow. That immediately sounds, well, much more serious than typical contempt. What are the consequences?
We're talking serious time, up to 10 years in prison, plus a 10-year ban from holding any public office afterwards. This isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's a really serious deterrent. It makes sure the judiciary's role as the guardian of the Constitution is, well, respected, maybe even feared a little. It's a strong shield for the Constitution right from the start.
That's incredibly strong. It really sets up the Supreme Court as a formidable bulwark, I suppose. But what about bigger threats, like someone trying to overthrow the whole system? Does the Constitution think about that?
Oh, it absolutely does. Article 3 is literally titled Defense of the Constitution, and it's remarkably explicit. First, it bans Parliament from ever setting up a one-party state. Makes any suppression of lawful political activity illegal, too.
Okay, so it protects multi-party democracy from, say, legislative maneuvers.
Exactly. But then it gets even sharper. Overthrowing the Constitution by violence or other unlawful means isn't just a crime. It's specifically defined as high treason. And the penalty: death. There's zero ambiguity here about how seriously the state views any attempt to dismantle its fundamental order.
Right, that's the state protecting itself with the ultimate penalty. But what about the people? You mentioned the sovereign will of the people earlier. Do ordinary citizens have an active role in defending this?
This, for me, is one of the most profound and, frankly, unique features of Ghana's constitution. Article 3, Clause 4. It declares that all citizens have both the right and the duty, and that word duty is absolutely critical here, to defend the Constitution. They're basically mandated to resist anyone trying to overthrow it and to help restore it if it gets overthrown.
A direct duty for every single citizen to be a guardian. That's extraordinary.
And what if a citizen does step up? Are they protected for doing that?
They are, yes. Clause 5 goes even further, granting immunity from prosecution to any citizen who takes lawful action, mind you, to resist or suppress an overthrow. It fundamentally entrusts the ultimate defense of the nation, not just to the military or the government, but you could say to a popular mandate. Every citizen is an active guardian, and they're protected for that act of patriotism.
So the Constitution puts immense trust and responsibility onto its citizens. Yeah. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Who exactly is Ghanaian, according to this document, and how is the territory itself managed? Chapter 3 covers citizenship.
Right. Now, birthright citizenship is pretty standard, as you'd expect, but there's a fascinating, quite distinctive requirement if you want to become a citizen by registration. You have to be able to speak and understand an indigenous language of Ghana.
An indigenous language, huh?
Mm.
That's not something you see in many citizenship processes around the world. What's the thinking behind that, do you reckon?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to be a clear signal about valuing cultural integration, not just, legal paperwork. It suggests needing a deeper connection to the national identity, something beyond just living there. And it's not a one-way street either. Citizenship can be revoked for things like actions against state security or public morality, or if you got it through fraud. It underlines that citizenship carries responsibilities too.
Interesting. A strong link between cultural belonging and legal status. Okay, now Ghana is a unitary republic, but how fixed are its internal borders? Can the government just redraw regional lines easily?
Oh, far from it. The Constitution makes changing regions incredibly demanding. It's definitely not a simple executive decision. Any change involves the president, sure, but also the Council of State, a whole commission of inquiry, and crucially, a referendum right there in the affected area.
A referendum sounds like a high bar, especially for what might seem like administrative changes. What kind of threshold are we talking about for these votes?
They are indeed very high. To create a new region, you need at least 50% voter turnout in that specific area, and 80% of those who actually vote must approve it. And for merging existing regions, it's even stricter in a way. You need 60% approval from voters in each of the regions involved. It really embeds local democratic consent deep into any major territorial change, prevents top-down restructuring without overwhelming popular support from the people living there.
That really emphasizes the local voice. Okay, sticking with land for a moment, what about property rights, especially for non-citizens, and the nation's natural resources?
Yeah, this area reflects a pretty strong sense of economic sovereignty, you could say. Article 266 explicitly states that non-citizens cannot hold freehold interest in land in Ghana. In fact, any freehold interest that non-citizens happened to hold before 1969 was actually converted into 50-year leases by the Constitution itself.
So no foreign ownership of land outright. That's a powerful statement about controlling national assets.
Absolutely. And that protective stance carries over to natural resources, too. Article 268 requires parliamentary ratification approval from Parliament for any major deal involving the exploitation of natural resources like minerals or oil.
Right, so the government can't just unilaterally sign away rights without the people's representatives having a say, scrutinizing it. Are there any loopholes or exceptions?
Well, Parliament can exempt certain classes of transactions, but only if they pass that exemption with a two-thirds majority vote. So even the exceptions require a very high degree of consensus. Collective oversight remains key over Ghana's natural wealth.
Okay, so we've established the nation's identity as strong self-defense mechanisms. Let's explore what Ghana's constitution promises its people directly. Chapter 5, Fundamental Human Rights and Freedoms. How comprehensive is this section? And are these rights actually enforceable?
It's remarkably comprehensive, yes. And crucially, these rights are enforceable against all entities, government bodies, individuals, even companies. They have real legal teeth. It covers the basics you'd expect, like the right to life, with lawful exceptions, of course, personal liberty, things like being told why you're arrested in a language you understand, getting access to a lawyer within 48 hours. Standard but vital stuff.
Those details on liberty are crucial. What about human dignity and equality? Are there strong protections there?
Absolutely. Article 15 puts a strong emphasis on human dignity, banning torture or any cruel, inhuman treatment. It also specifically requires separating people awaiting trial from convicted prisoners and keeping juveniles separate from adults, ensuring humane conditions. And then Article 17 guarantees equality and freedom from discrimination, gender, race, religion, economic status, social background, you name it.
So a broad anti-discrimination principle, but are there any nuances? Does it allow for things like affirmative action, or is it strictly colorblind, so to speak?
That's a great question. And yes, there are important nuances. Article 17 specifically allows for laws designed to correct existing social, economic, or educational imbalances, what we often call affirmative action. It also permits those restrictions we talked about earlier regarding non-citizens acquiring land. So it shows a balanced approach, aiming for universal rights while also allowing targeted measures to achieve national development or address historical inequities.
That's an important distinction to make. And when it comes to the justice system itself, how thorough are the fair trial provisions?
Article 19 lays out very thorough protections. Presumption of innocence, the right to a lawyer, including state-provided, if needed, in serious cases, the right to an interpreter. Standard fair trial rights, but spelled out clearly. For some serious offenses, jury trials are mandated. And here's a particularly strong safeguard. For crimes that carry the death penalty, a unanimous jury verdict is required.
Unanimous. For a death sentence, wow. That really underlines the gravity. That's an incredibly high bar.
It is. And it also bans retroactive criminal laws. You can't be punished for something that wasn't illegal when you did it, and double jeopardy, being tried twice for the same crime. Fundamental fairness is baked in.
Okay, so beyond these crucial legal rights, are there protections for, say, social and economic well-being?
Yes, definitely. And some are quite progressive for the time, and even now. Article 22, for instance, mandates equal access for spouses to property acquired during marriage and fair distribution if the marriage ends.
That's very forward-thinking, actually, ensuring a degree of economic justice within the family unit itself. What else is aimed at broader societal welfare?
While Article 24 guarantees broad economic rights, things like safe working conditions, the right to form trade unions, equal pay for equal work, standard labor rights, but constitutionally enshrined. Educationally, Article 25 sets the goal of free, compulsory basic education for all, eventually, and progressively free higher education, too. And then there are specific articles, 27, 28, and 29, dedicated to protecting women, children, defined as under 18, and people with disabilities, including specific safeguards against exploitation.
It sounds like a really holistic view of human rights, acknowledging the whole spectrum of human needs, not just legal ones. Okay, now Chapter 6 talks about directive principles of state policy. These aren't individual rights you can sue the government over, right? So what's their purpose?
That's right. They're not directly justiciable, meaning you can't typically take the government to court solely for failing to achieve them immediately. But they are incredibly important. Think of them as the nation's guiding stars, or maybe a long-term vision, a kind of philosophical roadmap for governance.
Like a moral compass for the state, then. What kind of political and economic goals do they set out?
Politically, Article 35 pushes for national integration, banning discrimination, fostering loyalty to Ghana above maybe local or ethnic ties, and promoting decentralization. Economically, Article 36 aims for maximizing development, welfare, creating jobs, ensuring fair pay. But it also includes this fascinating concept that land ownership carries a social obligation to serve the wider community. This is especially true for public lands or traditional stool, skin, or family lands.
A social obligation tied to land ownership. That's quite a profound idea, shifting away from purely individualistic property notions. And Article 36 also mandates the state protect the national environment for posterity. That's really forward-looking for 1992.
Indeed. It was quite visionary. Educationally, Article 38 repeats the goal of free, compulsory basic education, aiming to achieve it within 10 years of the Constitution coming into force, and also progressively free higher education. These principles together paint a picture of a state that's actively meant to be working towards a more just, prosperous, and sustainable future for everyone.
So the state has these guiding principles, citizens have their rights. But you mentioned earlier that citizens also have duties. Where does the Constitution spell those out?
That comes in Article 41, titled Duties of the Citizen, and it's a pretty comprehensive list, clearly intended to balance all those rights we just discussed with explicit responsibilities.
Right, rights and responsibilities. What's on that duty list?
Well, it includes things like upholding and defending the Constitution. There's that critical theme again. Fostering national unity, respecting the rights and freedoms of others, working conscientiously in your occupation, protecting public property, contributing to the well-being of your community, defending Ghana if needed, paying your taxes honestly, and importantly, protecting and safeguarding the environment.
That's a robust set of expectations. It really communicates that active, responsible citizenship isn't just nice to have, it's considered essential for the nation's health. Okay, so the Constitution paints a clear picture of the social contract rights and duties for citizens, guiding principles for the state. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts, the structure of government and the checks and balances. How does the electoral system work to ensure fair representation?
Chapter 7 lays out the right to vote for citizens 18 and up. But the absolute cornerstone here is the Independent Electoral Commission. Articles 43 through 46 really hammer this home. It handles everything voter registration, drawing constituency boundaries, running all public elections and referenda, and critically, it is explicitly stated to not be subject to the direction or control of any person or authority.
That independence is absolutely vital, isn't it, for public trust in the whole democratic process. Now, you mentioned decentralization earlier. There's something quite unique about local government elections in Ghana, isn't there?
Yes, this is a really distinctive feature. Article 248 says that candidates for district assembly elections, that's the local government level, must run as individuals. Political parties are explicitly banned from endorsing, sponsoring, or campaigning for or against any candidate.
No party politics at all in local elections. That's genuinely fascinating. What's the thinking behind that design?
Well, the idea seems to be to keep local issues and community needs right at the forefront, to try and prevent national party politics and partisan squabbles from dominating local governance. It's a deliberate attempt, it seems, to foster a kind of grassroots democracy focused purely on local priorities and merit rather than party affiliation.
That's a clear commitment to keeping things local. But how are these local assemblies funded then if they're somewhat separate from the national party machines?
That's addressed very directly through the District Assembly's Common Fund, set up in Article 252. Parliament is actually required to allocate every year not less than 5% of Ghana's total national revenue, specifically for development in the districts.
A guaranteed slice of the national pie, at least 5%, that's a significant, predictable funding stream to empower local government.
Okay, moving up to the national level, the president, obviously a powerful figure. Is there presidential immunity, and how's that balanced? Yes. Article 57 grants the president immunity from both civil and criminal proceedings while they're in office. The rationale is primarily to allow them to perform their duties without being constantly tied up in court or facing nuisance suits. However, that power is balanced by a pretty robust impeachment process, which is detailed in Article 69. It's a high bar, mind you. It requires a petition, an investigation by a special tribunal, judges, maybe a medical board depending on the grounds, and ultimately a two-thirds majority vote by secret ballot in Parliament to remove the president.
So removal is definitely possible, but it clearly requires a very broad cross-partisan consensus. High bar, as you say.
Oh.
What about the legislature, Parliament itself? Any interesting rules there to ensure stability or party coherence?
Chapter 10 sets up Parliament. One particularly notable rule, I think, is the anti-defection clause in Article 97. It basically says that if a member of Parliament who was elected on a particular party's ticket decides to leave that party or become an independent,
Yeah, what happens?
they automatically lose their seat. It's vacated immediately,
Yeah.
triggering a by-election.
Wow, immediate loss of seat. That's a powerful mechanism. It must really strengthen party discipline and maybe prevent the kind of instability you sometimes see with lots of floor crossing.
Precisely. It ensures, or tries to ensure, that an MP remains accountable to the platform and the party mandate they were elected on. Now, shifting to the judiciary, beyond its general independence, Article 135 gives the Supreme Court a very unique power. It has the exclusive authority to decide if official government documents should be withheld from court proceedings on grounds of national security or public interest.
So the government can't just declare something secret and hide it from the courts. The Supreme Court itself gets to review that claim.
Exactly. The government makes the claim, but the Supreme Court reviews it. And this review is done in camera, meaning privately, not in open court, to handle potentially sensitive information appropriately. It acts as a critical judicial check on potential executive overreach in using secrecy claims, trying to balance security with the need for evidence in legal matters.
Okay, we've seen how the main branches of government are set up and checked. But the Constitution also creates some independent watchdog bodies to hold power accountable. Let's start with the National Media Commission. What does it do?
Chapter 12 establishes the NMC. Its job is to guarantee media freedom and independence, and it explicitly prohibits censorship. Full stop. It also has a role in ensuring fair opportunity for diverse viewpoints in the state-owned media, and it obliges all media outlets to publish rejoinders or corrections when necessary. So, fostering responsible journalism alongside freedom.
Media freedom, but with a push for accuracy and fairness, sounds sensible. And then there's CHRJ, the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. That name alone sounds like it has a broad remit.
It truly is a powerhouse, yes. Chapter 18 outlines its functions. CHRAJ has this incredibly sweeping mandate. It investigates not just fundamental human rights violations, but also corruption, abuse of power, and unfair treatment by any public official. It effectively combines the roles you might find in separate bodies elsewhere, like an ombudsman for maladministration, plus a human rights commission, plus a strong anti-corruption agency. And crucially, it can initiate court proceedings itself if needed.
That's a really robust setup for tackling both human rights issues and upholding public integrity. Okay, and what about the National Commission for Civic Education, the NCCE? What's its specific role?
The NCCE, which comes from Chapter 19, has a distinct focus: educating the public about the Constitution itself, about their civic rights and responsibilities, and connecting back to our earlier point, explicitly teaching citizens how to defend the Constitution at all times. It's a direct mechanism designed to ensure an informed citizenry understands not just their rights, but also that fundamental duty to uphold the constitutional order we discussed right at the beginning.
That really closes the loop, doesn't it? An institution specifically tasked with teaching citizens their constitutional duties. Now, speaking of accountability again, Chapter 24 sets out a code of conduct for public officers. What's the most potent provision in there against, say, corruption?
Well, Article 284 deals with conflict of interest rules, which are
Mm.
important, but probably the most powerful mechanism is Article 286, which mandates asset declaration. A very wide range of top officials, president, vice president, ministers, MPs, judges, heads of public corporations, armed forces chiefs, you name it, must declare all their assets and liabilities when they take office, every 4 years while in office, and when they leave.
Asset declaration is fairly common internationally, but does it really have teeth in the Ghanaian context beyond just being paperwork? What if officials suddenly seem to get very wealthy while in office?
Here's where it gets really interesting and potentially very powerful. Clause 4 of Article 286 states, and this is crucial, any property acquired by a public officer after their initial declaration that cannot be reasonably attributed to income, gifts, loans, inheritance, or other legitimate sources
Yeah.
is deemed to have been acquired in contravention of this Constitution. Basically, it's presumed to be illicit wealth. The burden of proof shifts squarely onto the official to prove how they got it legitimately.
Deemed to have been acquired illegally. Wow, that's a game changer. It's effectively a constitutional presumption of guilt for unexplained wealth. That shifts the whole dynamic.
Precisely. It flips the usual burden.
Yeah.
And these declarations, combined with that presumption, can be used as evidence by courts or investigating bodies like CHRJ. It's designed as a direct, powerful anti-corruption tool built right into the fabric of the nation's foundational law.
So, with all these robust mechanisms for governance, for accountability, how adaptable is this whole blueprint? Can the Constitution itself be changed, and if so, how easily?
Yes, it can be changed. Chapter 25 covers the amendment process. But it makes a really crucial distinction between what you might call regular provisions and entrenched provisions.
Entrenched definitely sounds like much harder to change.
Much, much harder. These entrenched provisions cover the absolute core aspects of the state. The supremacy of the Constitution itself, the existence and legislative power of Parliament, the fundamental human rights and freedoms we discussed, the institution of chieftaincy, things like that. These are seen as foundational to the very identity and structure of Ghana, so altering them requires an extraordinary level of national consensus.
So, how exactly do you amend one of these entrenched provisions? It sounds like it won't be just a simple vote in Parliament.
No, it's deliberately designed to be difficult. First, any proposal to amend an entrenched provision has to go to the Council of State for advice. Then, it must be published officially for at least 6 months, allowing for widespread public debate and consideration. And only after that does it require a national referendum.
A national referendum, like the high bar for creating new regions, but presumably even tougher. What are the thresholds here?
Even higher, yes. For an amendment to an entrenched provision to pass the referendum stage, 2 conditions must be met. First, at least 40% of all eligible voters in the country must participate in the referendum. Voter apathy can kill the amendment. Second, of those who do vote, a staggering 75% must vote in favor of the amendment.
40% turnout and 75% approval. That is an incredibly high hurdle to clear for fundamental change. It really ensures that no simple majority, no temporary political wave, can easily alter the nation's bedrock principles.
Exactly. It builds an immense stability at the core. And only after successfully passing that demanding referendum can Parliament then vote to actually pass the amendment bill. Then finally the president signs it into law. It truly guarantees that fundamental shifts require broad, deep, overwhelming national support.
What an incredible deep dive that was into Ghana's 1992 constitution. We've really uncovered so many striking, even unique features, haven't we? From that explicit citizen duty to defend the Constitution backed up by immunity, no less to the specific property rights for spouses within marriage, those incredibly strict referendum rules for changing regions, and the fascinating nonpartisan nature of local elections.
Absolutely. And let's not forget those really robust anti-corruption measures, especially that powerful clause where unexplained wealth acquired by public officials is effectively deemed to have been acquired illegally. It's clear when you look at it all together that this document is far more than just a set of rules. It feels like a deliberate, careful, constructed blueprint designed to shape a resilient democratic society, anticipating potential problems and building in robust defenses.
It really does seem to weave together modern concerns like environmental protection, gender equality with respect for traditional structures like chieftaincy and communal land tenure, all while trying to balance this profound trust in its people with very clear responsibilities placed upon them.
It's a proactive, almost visionary document in many ways.
It seeks to safeguard democracy from multiple angles, integrating historical context and wisdom with, future-focused safeguards against potential abuses of power or instability.
Right. So maybe to leave you, our listeners, with something to ponder after this deep dive. In a world where perhaps we often focus very heavily on individual rights, what can we learn from a constitution like Ghana's? One that so explicitly balances those essential rights with a fundamental duty, a responsibility placed on every single citizen to actively defend the constitutional order itself. It even goes so far as to spell out how they should do it and protects them for taking that stand. It's a really powerful call, isn't it? A call to collective responsibility in protecting and maintaining democracy. Something to think about.